Question number 1, Mr. Gwilym Jones.
Number 1, sir.
Mr. Speaker, sir, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall be having further meetings later today. This evening I hope to have an audience of Her Majesty the Queen.
Mr. Gwilym Jones.
Would not my right honourable friend agree that it is an absolute outrage for members of this honourable House to incite others to break the law?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I totally agree with my honourable friend. It's a negation of democracy and an appalling example to all young people whom we urge to obey the rule of law, because without that there can be no order. I welcome the condemnation of the right honourable gentleman opposite of the violence, and also his condemnation of the 31 honourable members opposite who are saying that they will not in fact obey the law. Those are his words. We now await for him to follow it up with action.
John Hume Robertson.
Sir.
Come on. I refer the honourable gentleman to the block moments ago.
Mr. Hume Robertson.
Mr. Speaker, we in Scotland... If she doesn't mind me borrowing that phrase, we in Scotland are still waiting for the answers to a large number of the questions that she ran away from when she visited our country last week. Does she recall, and do her honourable friends recall, that 11 out of 21 Scottish Tory members of Parliament lost their seats in 1987, largely because of the poll tax? Since she managed to make the draw for the semi-finals of the SFA competition fully a week before the quarter-finals took place, would she now like to draw the next batch of losers on her own back benches before she feels that herself?
Mr. Speaker, I would like the right honourable gentleman to take action on the 31 members who are refusing to pay the community charge, and to know from the honourable gentleman whether he himself believes in upholding the law or not.
Mr. Cranley Onslow. Order! Mr. Cranley Onslow.
If my right honourable friend needs the reassurance, which I doubt, can I assure her that last Sunday's press reports of polls and plots against her were indeed absolute
Order! House, order! I House want to hear the Prime Minister's reply.
May I thank my right honourable friend? I didn't believe them anyway, and sought the usual source near to number 10 Downing Street, which dismissed them as bunkum and balderdash. Got it absolutely right.
Harry Cohen.
Honourable gentleman, to the reply which I gave some moments ago.
Mr. Cohen.
Will the Prime Minister respond to the PSI report, which showed that nearly 3 million households owed £3 billion in personal debt, and that as the poll tax is 33% higher than last year's rates and will be a bigger burden than that on many families, mortgage rates are sky high and rent set to rise 20%, aren't the government plunging people deeper and deeper into the red? And aren't the British people showing that they're fed up with being bled white and blue?
Nonsense, Mr. Speaker. It will not have escaped the honourable gentleman's notice that the rates of income tax are far below any that ever reigned during Labour's time, that they're now 25 pence in the pound as the standard rate and 40 pence in the pound as the upper rate. May I point out to the honourable gentleman that if the community charges are very high, it is the fault of Labour Council.
Order! Order! Prime Minister.
Right? It is...
Order! Order! Very disorderly. We must hear the reply to these questions. Prime Minister.
It is quite clear, Mr. Speaker, that it always costs more under Labour.
Rupert Allison.
Does my right honourable friend agree that given the Banking Act's requirement that fit and proper people should hold banking licences, does she think that the brothers Fayed ought to hold a banking licence at Harrods?
Mr. Speaker, that is a matter for the regulatory authorities and not a matter for me. The regulations are clearly laid down. How the law is applied is a matter for those authorities, and how prosecution happens is a matter for my right honourable friend, the Attorney General, and I noticed that he answered questions upon this matter yesterday.
Mr. Speaker, with that last answer, I'm sure the whole House will have noticed the Right Honourable Lady's very choosy view of law and order. Will the Prime Minister...
Order!
Well, yes, of course.
Order! Order!
Will the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, give us an assurance that despite the continued rise in retail sales, the government will not resort to higher interest rates yet again?
Mr. Speaker, with regard to the right honourable gentleman's first comment, I should have thought he'd have known that prosecution is never a matter for politicians. Never. He doesn't even know. And the day a politician can say, the day a politician could institute prosecutions, that day the rule of law would end. The prosecuting authorities are independent and they are not politicians. With regard to the figures of the retail sales, which were up 2% on this time last year, may I point out that the previous year they were up by 4%, and the year before that they were up by 8%. So there is a steady progression downwards, and therefore the interest rates are working.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister ought to check the figures. This time last year, the rise was 2.2%, which is less than it has been in the last month. Doesn't she realise yet that her high interest rate policies are not controlling demand, but they are increasing inflation? That which she said would cure inflation is actually causing it. Can't she admit that and not take a course which will add to the problems and make matters worse?
No, Mr. Speaker. The retail prices this year are 2% above what they were this time last year. The retail sales this year are 2% above what they were this time last year. Last year they were 4% above what they had been the previous year, and the previous year was 8%. So there is a steady progression downwards in the volume of retail sales. There is no other way of getting inflation down than by increasing the price of money. And if he looks at what previous Labour ministers of finance have said, he will find that they took the same view.
Mr. Speaker, hasn't the Prime Minister got hold of it yet? That her policies are failing to manage demand. They are increasing inflation. They're decreasing manufacturing investment, and they're clobbering every home buyer in the country because of mortgage rates. How is that helping to reduce inflation, an objective shared by all sensible people, but not fulfilled by the Prime Minister and her policies?
But I thought that the right honourable gentleman was complaining that demand with the retail sales was still pretty high. Now, he can't have it both ways. Either he's saying people haven't got any money, or else he's saying they have rather a lot to make the retail sales higher than a year ago. And in any case, we do not take lessons from inflation upon him. His government got it at 27%, a record throughout this century.
Mr. Churchill!
Will my right honourable friend spell out the consequences of any campaign of civil disobedience as advocated by certain honourable and right honourable gentlemen opposite? Would it not have the effect of starving local authorities of resources and thereby leading to tens of thousands of job losses in local government, and furthermore to the curtailment of services to the elderly and the disabled? Is this what the party opposite wants?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely correct. If people do not obey the law and pay their community charge, which is the fairest charge we've ever had for local authorities, far fairer than the opposition's alternative, the consequences will be that there would not be enough money for teachers, there'd not be enough money for community care to look after old people, and there'd not be enough money to look after children. And they would be willfully damaging those whose interests they claim to represent.
Mr. Tony Lloyd!
Number 4, sir.
I defer the honourable gentleman to reply which I gave some moments ago.
Tony Lloyd!
Mr. Speaker, is the Prime Minister aware that doctors in Manchester have now gone on record saying that patients are dying because of lack of intensive care beds, and those beds aren't available because the authorities don't have the money to pay the trained staff? Now, the Prime Minister normally gives a long lecture at this point, Mr. Speaker. Can she simply say what it is she intends to do to make sure that my constituents and those of my colleagues in that area don't die through lack of beds being available?
Mr. Speaker, I can only say that more money has been made available by the taxpayer for the health service this year than ever before. This year, an additional £2.4 billion. Next year, a further amount of £3 billion, so that altogether that amounts to some £39 a week in respect of every family in the country. And we look to regional and district health authorities to use the money well, and we notice that the great majority of them are able to do so and provide services which most people find excellent.
Sir John Maples!
My right honourable friend find time today to congratulate the Labour-controlled council in Barking and Dagenham on having set their community charge at £280, just £2 over the government's suggested figure. And as that part of London is represented in this House by two members of the Shadow Cabinet, one of whom is their chief spokesman on environmental matters, does she not think it would be an excellent example for them and us to hold out to other Labour councils of what can be achieved?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend makes his own point very effectively. It is possible to live within the government's guidelines for spending, and some Labour councils are already doing so. That only shows up the rest as deliberately trying to overspend in order to make it difficult for their local authority constituents.
Fern!
I defer the honourable gentleman to reply which I gave some moments ago.
Money Fern!
Mr. Speaker, with 2 million more people in debt, 400,000 people now 2 months in rate arrears and mortgage arrears, and with the divorce rate increasing almost double now, does the Prime Minister not think now that she is absolutely crucifying the women of this country and family life?
No, Mr. Speaker. No, Mr. Speaker. There are far many more people in owner-occupied houses now than there were some 10 years ago. With regard to the prospect for women of this country, there are more now with jobs than I think than there ever have been throughout the whole of our history. And may I point out that separate taxation for married women comes in from the 1st of April. It again will be the first time, and it will be very, very welcome indeed to many, many people.
To John Boris!
I refer my honourable friend to reply which I gave some moments ago.
Boris!
Has my right honourable friend had time to see the NSPCC report linking Satanism practices with child abuse? And will she do everything possible in the government's power to support the police and the child welfare agencies to stamp out this loathsome practice?
Mr. Speaker, I saw the report from the NSPCC reported this morning in the newspapers. I think that everyone in all parts of the House will be absolutely outraged that children are used for perversion, sexual abuse, or pornography. And everyone will be equally anxious to stamp this out. We have, in fact, increased the penalties for child cruelty. We've tightened the law on child pornography by making possession of this material an offence, and tackling it remains a priority for the police. But we do need the evidence, and if anyone has evidence about the cruelty to children, they should not hesitate to place it before the police so we can take action as quickly as possible.
Statement, Mr. Richard Luce.